Hello everyone, welcome to Sab's Rehabs. I have over a decade of experience flipping furniture. I'm going to put my skills to the test and see if I can revive a severely damaged antique dresser. A friend was kind enough to give me this dresser. It had been in his family for many years and eventually over time just found itself being moved out into the barn where it has sat exposed to the elements for years. The old finish has melted into beads and there is tons and tons of dirt and dust all over this. Plus there's a little bit of water damage. Now you can see that this piece of furniture is dirty, like really dirty. So it can't stay in my house like this. I'm gonna take it outside and give it a good old clean. I immediately set the furniture in sun so it could dry quickly. Now next is removing all the things that are not going to stay on this piece. A lot of these antique pieces are on casters and these old casters just do not stand the test of time. I remove the old ones and replace them with new ones later. On the top piece, there are some cracks that need to be glued up on this, so I go ahead and remove this top piece. There are only two pieces of veneer on this dresser and it happens to be the two side panels. Unfortunately, one of them did get some water damage and it is bubbled up at the bottom. So I'm just removing that loose veneer and pulling it off as much as possible. I have a plan to easily fix this side panel. The bottom of the bottom drawer also received water damage and was super wavy, so I removed that piece as well and I will get new pieces cut from Home Depot to replace them. Antique dressers like this one have been around for a long time. They have been through a lot and they more than likely have been moved around a whole lot. So sometimes all the joints don't stay glued up like they should. It's not something to worry too much about. It's nothing that a little bit of good old wood glue can't fix right up. All right, even though I have a lot of clamps in my workshop, I didn't have any long enough for the drawers to fix this top drawer. So sometimes you have to get really creative and just work with what you have on hand. I happen to have some ratchet straps in my vehicle that I use for loading and hauling furniture, and those exactly what I needed to get this drawer glued and repaired. There were a lot of other areas that needed to be glued up. So for those, I put the wood glue in a syringe. This is actually a dental syringe that I ordered off Amazon. It really helps to get into all those small cracks and crevices. I just repeat the same method, put the glue down into the cracks, use a clamp to hold the wood into place, and then wipe with a damp paper towel to remove all that excess glue. This piece took a lot of gluing and clamping. I'm thankful that I have a lot of clamps in my stock, and I just let all that set overnight. The next day, I started with putting everything all back together again. I took measurements from the old bottom of this drawer and went to Home Depot. I gave them the measurements and they cut me out a new piece. This is 1/4 inch birch plywood. For the top piece, I used a little bit of wood glue before I put it into place. It had some nails that were stuck in, so I used a mallet to hammer those back down. And there were also screws on the inside that I just re-screwed, and this was back into place. Now for that one side panel that had water damage, I also had Home Depot create or cut down to size a new piece of side panel out of that 1/4 inch birch wood. My plan was to use liquid nails to glue this into place. I don't know what was going on with this tube, but it broke my dispenser, so I cut it open and I'm using a gloved hand to spread that around. I then flipped the piece over and put it into place and then weighted it down. The liquid nails does say to let it set and dry for at least 24 hours. I'm on day 3 of prepping this piece of furniture, and I start that day with my carbide scraper. There is a lot of this old finish that just has not lasted, and with the elements that it's been exposed to and just probably the heat and cooling, this finish has bubbled up into little beads all over, and I need to remove that. And you can see how easy it just flakes right off. I don't have to try very hard. It is ready to come off of this piece. After all the carbide scraping, I do go ahead and grab my Surf Prep sander, and I use some 120 grit sandpaper because this surface is still pretty rough, and I scuff sand the entire surface. I sand everything, the inside and outside. This antique had a lot of damage. It took a lot of sanding, and I don't want to bore you with minutes of my hours and hours of sanding, but just know that I sand a lot, and we're gonna go ahead and skip to the next part. I sanded out a lot of the nicks and dings that this dresser got over the years, but there were a few kind of larger size gashes and nicks in it. So I mixed up some Bondo to fill those areas. I let the Bondo set and I came back to just a tiny bit more sanding just over the Bondo areas. And I'm just sanding those so they're nice and smooth and flush with the rest of the surface around it. Really old antiques are notorious for being bleeders, and also this is 95% solid wood, so I want to protect that wood in case someday someone does want to actually come back and completely restore this piece. So for primer today, I am using clear shellac. To spray shellac indoors, I have a ventilator mask on, 3 windows open in my workshop, and a fan blowing for ventilation. I did 2 coats of the shellac. I allowed it to dry for 4 hours. Now I'm using a 400 grit sanding sponge to lightly go over that surface, and I'm just knocking back any bumpies that might have gotten or stuck to the surface from spraying that shellac. After sanding, you always want to wipe your surface with a microfiber cloth to remove that sanding residue. The very last step before we finally get to the fun, creative part of this furniture flip is to fill some of the gaps with paintable caulk. This is a silicone caulk, and I go around the edges of each side panel or anywhere the frame has moved and there's a little bit more gap exposed than what I want to be visible. This stuff is so easy to use. You just lay down a bead of the silicone, use a gloved finger to wipe up the excess, silicone, and then I come back with a damp paper towel to wipe over it one more time so you get a nice smooth transition and not a chunky strip of silicone. This stuff takes about 20 to 30 minutes to dry, and then you're ready to start painting. All right, inspiration for furniture flips can come from anywhere and everywhere all at the same time. For this specific dresser, I let who gave me the dresser be my inspiration for what direction the look took. This piece was given to me by a friend of mine. The piece had been sitting in his horse barn, and he used to ride broncs in the rodeo. So when I saw this decoupage paper on Etsy, the majestic horse in the print just really spoke to me, and I knew that was the perfect decoupage paper for this piece. This paper isn't large enough to fill the entire front section of where the drawers are at, so there will be a harsh line from where the paper ends and the drawer is still going on. So to make that transition not quite as noticeable, I have a bowl of water and I'm just wetting the edge and using my fingers to pull off some of that so it's not a straight line, it's nice and jagged, and it's going to be easier to blend in and not see that once it's painted. To apply the paper, I use the sandwich method. I put down a coat of clear coat, put the paper into place, and then I cut with a razor blade around the drawers so they're still functional, and then go back with that clear coat again on top. There is a strip of dresser frame in between each drawer, so it's up to the creator how you want to do it. Some will chop the print up and just do it on the drawer fronts. I like to have one fluid image on the front of my dressers, so I do also attach the paper to that strip in between the drawers so it's not chopped up and it is one beautiful flowing piece of artwork on the front. I let that clear coat thoroughly dry, and then to clean up the razor blade cuts, I use a sanding sponge at a 45-degree angle. I go around the edges of the drawers and the frame in between on the dresser. Now, choosing what colors to paint the dresser was really a simple choice. I just looked at the colors that were in the decoupage paper. I looked at what I had available in stock already in my workshop and just used those colors to do a blended look going out from the horse. I am using a combination of Dixie Belle's Gravel Road, the color chocolate, and then Annie Sloan's Pure White to create this blended faded look around the horse. I lay down the Gravel Road first, and then I dip my brush in the chocolate and pure white at the same time, dab that on, and I do the dab method to add some texture to hide the edge of the decoupage paper, and I keep dabbing until it has the blended look that I want. I do end up dabbing in a little bit of Dixie Belle's color Caviar around the edges. When doing this dab blend method, I do make sure to work in sections so the paint stays wet. Now, when I took a step back and I saw what the blended paint looked around the horse, I knew that whole area was magical and I wanted it to stand apart and look separate from the rest. So that made the decision easy to go ahead and paint the body of the dresser a completely different color. That way, the horse and its blended area around it really stood out, and that's your center focus point of this piece. For the body of the dresser and the legs, I decided to use that Dixie Belle's Caviar, and I painted 2 coats of the Caviar, allowing it to dry a couple hours in between each coat. Dixie Belle chalk paint is super thick, so I do have water added to my jar to thin this out a little bit to make it easier to work with. I've been working with chalk paint for many years, and my best 2 pieces of advice is to only dip your brush in the canister about 1 inch and then wipe the back of the brush off and use only that amount of paint to work with. My second tip is to always have a water bottle handy to spritz so you can spray the surface and give yourself more time or as much time as you need to lay that paint down and get it the way that you want it to look before it dries. All right, this piece is moving right along. Just a few final touches before this piece is done. Now, chalk paint does need to be protected, so I have a 400 grit sanding sponge. I'm just lightly going over the surface, and you can see that it makes marks all up in the chalk paint whenever you do sand it. That's just an easy way to tell the areas that you have sanded and you have not. But don't worry, whenever you add top coat, those sanded marks and stuff will disappear. I wiped up all that sanding dust and applied the top coat. Now, chalk paint has a really matte finish, and I really like that look. So this is Katja's clear coat in the matte finish. I did 3 coats of a clear coat for protection, and I allowed it to dry in between each coat. So I kind of have a mixture of products, Dixie Belle, Annie Sloan, and Katja, but these are all water-based products, so just know that you can use different products together as long as they're the same base. Rockler Woodworking Company makes these wooden casters that fit almost every antique dresser. They're about 15 bucks for a set, and it's just an easy fix to update those casters. The insides of the drawers are just gross from being used over the years. So I measured the inside of the drawer, and I used this wood grain peel and stick wallpaper I found on Amazon to line the bottom of the drawers. I really like this pattern because it's just a continuation of that horse barn theme I have going on. These drawers are solid wood, but it is old wood that needs to be conditioned and protected. So I'm using Howard Citrus Shield. This is a paste wax. This smells like oranges, so it makes the drawers smell amazing. It also protects and seals, so I use this paste wax on the inside of the body of the dresser along the drawer slides to help the drawers slide in and out well. I didn't want to take away from the horse print, so I ordered some generic oil rubbed bronze knobs to replace the old handles. This piece was so much work, but it is finally done. Let's take a look at our before and after. Here is a quick reminder of our antique dresser with good bones, but just many years of damage on the piece. And then this is what it looks like now. No more stains on the inside of the drawers and no more caked dust on the top of this piece. I love the story of this dresser, how it came to me from a friend and he gave me that inspiration to create this final look. I didn't know at the time when I bought the decoupage paper, but he actually used to have a horse that looked just like that. And so he ended up buying the dresser back from me to put in his own home. So win-win for both of us. I really hope you guys enjoyed this furniture flip. If you haven't already, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. That is all I have for you today. Until next time.